Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Top 10 Star Trek Romulan episodes. So this video is where I rank my top 10 favorite episodes of Star Trek that feature or are centered around the Romulans. I looked at shows from all 5 Star Trek series, the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. I ranked them in order of which episode I think is best. However, I also take into account which episode portrays the Romulans better and look specifically at the storyline involving the Romulans. So, typically I start off these top 10 videos with naming my bottom 5 least favorite episodes. However, I found in the case of Romulan episodes, I didn't really have a worst 5. If I were to name the 5 at the bottom of my list, I'd be naming good episodes that I really liked. I suppose I could have done like a bottom 2 or 3, but even then, they'd just be mediocre episodes. The truth is, I don't think there are any truly bad Romulan-centered episodes, so I'm just going to skip that part and jump straight into my top 10. But I'll start off by naming a few honorable mentions that didn't quite make my top 10, but are really great Romulan episodes worth mentioning. First up is Visionary, a great Deep Space Nine episode. While O'Brien periodically travels 6 hours into the future, the Romulans interrogate the Deep Space Nine crew and grill them for information on the Dominion. And through his time traveling, O'Brien eventually thwarts an attempt by the Romulans to destroy the station and collapse the wormhole. Next honorable mention is Contagion, the second season Next Generation episode where the Enterprise contracts a computer virus capable of destroying their ship while investigating a mythical planet in the neutral zone. Through their snooping, the Romulans also contract the virus on their ship, and the Enterprise must deal with them as they try to find the source of the issue. And finally, there's Unification, a 2-part Next Generation episode where Picard and Data go to Romulus disguised as Romulans in order to retrieve Ambassador Spock, who went AWOL, only to discover that he's been working with an underground Romulan movement that aims to overthrow the current government and reconnect with the Vulcan ancestors. So now I'll get into my top 10 favorite Romulan episodes, starting with my number 10, The Mind's Eye. This 4th season Next Generation episode is one of the darker and more disturbing episodes of the Next Generation, as it shows Geordi LaForge being abducted and tortured and brainwashed by the Romulans, and he's sent on a mission to kill a Klingon governor in order to weaken the alliance between the Klingons and the Federation. This episode had some awesome political intrigue as well as exploring the personal cost on Geordi LaForge, and it showcased just how sinister and devious the Romulans can be. Number 9 is the Pegasus, the 7th season Next Generation episode where a former captain of Rikers, who's now an admiral played by Terry O'Quinn, who would later become well known for his portrayal of John Locke on Lost, orders the Enterprise to look for a 13-year-old Starfleet ship with some highly classified technology. But meanwhile, the Romulans are eager to get their hands on this ship as well, so it becomes a race as both ships scan the asteroid field looking for this ship. What I love about the portrayal of the Romulans in this episode is that they both know exactly what they're doing, but they both talk in like false pretenses, like they're just conducting scientific research. And throughout the episode, the Romulans maintain this pretense of being a helpful ally, even when it's painfully obvious what's really going on. Plus, this episode explains why the Federation doesn't use cloaking technology. It's due to a treaty with the Romulans that forbids them from using cloaking technology that has maintained the peace between the two superpowers. Number 8 is Redemption, the Next Generation 2-parter that was mostly centered around the Klingons, as the Klingon Empire was split in the Civil War. However, the Romulans were also involved, as they were secretly supplying one of the sides of the Civil War, meaning if that side won, they would break their alliance with the Federation and ally with the Romulans instead. So Picard assembles a fleet to form a blockade to prevent the Romulans from supplying the Klingon faction with this weapon. A blockade that almost fails, but due to the ingenuity of one of the ship's captains, a one Lieutenant Commander Data, it succeeds. Although I'm not the biggest fan of the reveal of Tasha Yar's half-Romulan daughter, I did find the political intrigue and how the Romulans deviously tried to shift power in the Alpha Quadrant very interesting. Number 7 is Star Trek Nemesis. So I decided to go ahead and include movies since I included them in my top 10 Borg countdown, and Nemesis, in my opinion, is a highly underrated movie that has a lot of underappreciated qualities, none the least being a performance by Tom Hardy as a clone of Picard who seizes control of the Romulan Empire. This film explores an underclass of species in the Romulan Empire known as Remans, who are from the planet that neighbors Romulus, which we heard mentioned before. In this film, the Remans stage a coup and take control of the Romulan Senate, which many Romulan military commanders went along with because the Remans promised to destroy the Federation. A lot of very fascinating political intrigue that reshapes the face of the Romulan Empire and even shows them building a trust with the Federation at the end as they team up with the Enterprise to stop the Remans from destroying Earth. Number 6 is Eye of the Needle, the first season Voyager episode where the Voyager crew encountered a micro wormhole that leads back to the Alpha Quadrant. However, on the other side is a Romulan ship that is very distrustful of a Federation vessel. And Janeway strives to win the trust of the Romulan commander in order to help them to return home. This was an amazing character story that showed the Romulans are just people too, and that they can relate to people of the Federation as long as they can put aside the petty differences of their governments, as the Romulan commander forms a true bond with Captain Janeway. Number 5 is Balance of Terror, the original series episode that marked the first ever appearance of the Romulans. This was a great episode that was basically a game of cat and mouse between the Enterprise and the Romulan ship, as the Romulan ship, using cloaking technology that the Federation was previously unaware of, destroyed several Federation outposts. This episode is great because we see from the Romulans' perspective and how they aren't just evil villains, but simply just have different motivations, and how they emphasize how similar Kirk and the Romulan commander really are, while at the same time exploring the cost of war. Number 4 is Enter Armin Silent Legis, the 7th season Deep Space Nine episode which sees Dr. Bashir going to a conference on Romulus during the time of Starfleet's alliance with the Romulans in order to take on the Dominion. However, Bashir is recruited by Section 31, who attempt to use Bashir to affect internal politics on Romulus as they prepare for the next war after the Dominion War with the Romulans, and want to affect the political landscape in the Federation's favor. During the course of trying to thwart Section 31, Bashir ends up playing right into their hands. In this episode, we get another look into the Romulan homeworld and its internal politics, but this time it's far more intriguing as it's centered around a game of spies of political intrigue where you never know who is on whose side. Number 3 is Face of the Enemy, the 6th season Next Generation episode where Troy is abducted by the Romulans' underground movement and changed to appear like a Romulan in order to assist the underground movement in smuggling dissidents that have been discovered out of Romulan space. However, Troy must play the part of a high-ranking Tal Shiar officer who consistently bumps heads with the Romulan commander. This was an amazing episode, not only for the high-tension, suspenseful story where Troy was in danger of being discovered at every moment, but also into the insight that we got into the Romulan life that this episode gave us, as it introduced us to the Tal Shiar, the vicious authoritarian intelligence wing of the Romulan Empire, and how they control even those in the Romulan military. A truly insightful episode. Number 2 is The Defector, the 3rd season Next Generation episode that saw a Romulan attempting to defect to the Enterprise in order to prevent a war between Romulus and the Federation. While he defects, he still stubbornly refuses to give up vital information on the Romulans because he still considers himself a patriot, which in turn makes it hard for the Federation to trust him, until they learn he is actually a high-ranking admiral known for pulling off a massacre on a Federation outpost. Eventually, he does tell them everything they need to know to prevent this war from coming. This was a story of political intrigue, spies, and war told from a very personal perspective, as we got to see the personal toll it took on this man's life and how he was willing to sacrifice himself in order to prevent a war. It was a truly, extremely powerful and heartwarming story. And my number one favorite Romulan episode of Star Trek is In the Pale Moonlight, the 6th season Deep Space Nine episode where Captain Sisko is desperate to bring the Romulans into the war with the Dominion as an ally. At this time that the episode takes place, the Romulans have a non-aggression pact with the Dominion, while the Federation's situation becomes extremely desperate as they are not faring too well in this war, and they desperately need the Romulans on their side. So, with the aid of the former Cardassian spy Garrick, Sisko concocts a devious plan to trick the Romulans into joining the war on their side by fabricating evidence that the Dominion planned to attack Romulus. In order to make this plan work, Sisko must convince a pro-Dominion, Starfleet-hating Romulan senator known as Vreenak that this lie is the truth. This is an amazing episode which I cannot say enough good things about. In fact, I did a whole 2-hour podcast with Phil the Issues Guy over on his channel where we examined just how great this episode is. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to check that out. As you may have noticed, most of the previous entries on this countdown were examples of how devious the Romulans are, but this episode is an example of the Federation and our main heroes on Deep Space Nine being the ones who are being devious to the Romulans, as they are thrown in a desperate situation as the Federation is at risk of being obliterated. And plus, this particular character of Senator Vreenak has to be my favorite Romulan ever introduced. He's witty, stern, and completely unmovable. Seeing him butt heads with Sisko was some of the best drama ever to appear on Star Trek, and just the twists and turns this episode takes is simply unparalleled in the Star Trek universe, making this my number one favorite Star Trek Romulan episode. So that's it for my top 10 Star Trek Romulan episodes. Be sure to check out my channel for many other Star Trek top 10 videos, as well as I do take requests for Star Trek episode reviews. So if there's an episode from any of the 5 Star Trek series that you'd like me to review, just leave a comment below with the episode you'd like me to review, and I'll endeavor to do so, but only 1 episode request per person, please. And be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.